Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited and happy to be here. I'm Kelvin Chang, your broker with Coldwell Banker Dynasty, and just wanted to really cover an important topic that many of you have been asking about. It's regarding the new disclosures, new forms, and revisions, updates that we recently just experienced in December. CAR every June and December will make some reviews and edits and modifications to all of our forms. That's a member benefit for us realtors, so that we're always staying in compliance. We're always reviewing and checking for accuracy slash updating to new legislation. So you'll always see updates every June and December. And so that's the focus of today's class. I'm going to start showing you how to find this stuff. And so I want to teach you guys where to go if any time you want to understand what's going on in the back behind the scenes in terms of forms and disclosures and all that stuff. There is a very easy way to do so. So when you log in, I'm going to go ahead and log into my car and sign right in. Hopefully you guys do see my browser pulled up. And I can show you my car website once logged in. Okay. So I want you to go into Transaction Center and Standard Forms. Okay. So I'm going to click right here, Standard Forms. That's where the go-to place is. Now, there is a button here called Form Revisions and New Form Releases. Okay, this is where you always get to check what to expect. And you can even do this early before December and be able to find the changes. Okay, so if you can see my screen right now, this is the December release. And they even have it all the way every June and December. You can see it's a pattern that the Standard Forms Committee from CAR is always taking a look at this every legislative meeting that they have. Okay, so after clicking the December release, which is the newest forms to go over, I'm going to click two buttons. I'm going to click the summary guide. I'm going to open this up. And I also want to click right here. Okay. Now, I don't know if you see my screen well or not. Let me make it smaller too. Do you guys see my title, REBS Standard Forms?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. This is going to be what's called the exact document where you can see red lines on the changes, the alterations to every form that's out there. So I like to use the red line changes because then I can compare it to the past. So as you can see here, I'm just going to give you one example. Okay. And we'll go to the residential listing agreement. Okay, this is updated and modified, and I'll show you the proposed changes that have been ratified by the standard forms and CRMLS. So I don't know if it popped up for you on your screens. I'm going to pull it back up again and show you. This is the December residential listing agreement updated with the December 2023. Do you guys see the listing contract or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Um, The only change that's really important for you to understand, this is the same listing agreement. If you see it in black, that's telling you it's unchanged. What you do see is this red marks here. And this is now what's called a maximum residential listing period, where your listing with your seller can only be a maximum of 24 months for 1 to 4 units. Commercial could be still negotiable. But so that means you only have 2 years maximum to sign a listing agreement. If you, I don't even you need 2 years. If you're a good listing agent, you price your properties right, you know, 6 to 9 months should be adequate. That's my broker recommendation for you if you to sell a property. But obviously, if you have circumstances like a tenant occupied or someone's kind of being hostile to this transaction, or maybe the seller says, I want to stay here and remain here up until the school year of June. That's the only time I'll move out and afterwards, but I want to put it on the listing now. You obviously have circumstances why you would take a 9 or 12 month or 18-month listing or even up to 24. There's many different reasons why. So just letting you know, 2 years is your maximum. And this does not apply if the seller is a corporation, LLC, or partnership. So it's only if it's individuals, really, right? So, and the other item that's changed, it is not a lawful for any broker or listing agent to record this document with the county recorder's office. This is not something that you can try to place a lien against a seller who failed to pay you your commission or whatnot. So we do not record listing agreements against the property's title. Does that make any sense or any questions? Okay. Now, obviously, everything else is the same. You're going to put in a price like I want to sell this house for $1 million, and I'm going to ask for an X%. Okay. And if you look down below, nothing else is red except for these little ones and twos and A and Bs regarding presentation of offers. And the seller, by default, instructs broker to present all offers as soon as possible, unless seller gives broker written instructions to the contrary. Sometimes the seller may say, look, it's the first 2 weeks, so I do not want to look at any offer for the first 14 days. They have to email you. I don't want to see and review anything until, you know, the 15th day or afterwards, and then we'll present them all at the same time. So that could be done using these two check boxes to notify when you want to present these offers if the seller has specific instructions. If you don't, you are by default, you're going to present offers as they come in. Okay, and that's the default. So you're going to have nothing really much else changed or altered on the listing contract. And I just want to make one really strong point here in which we are having a situation regarding seller signature. If you take a listing contract or a purchase agreement, make sure you have full authority. I can't tell you how bad it is that I'm experiencing a situation at the moment where we represented a buyer. The listing agent communicated acceptance, delivered an executed agreement to our buyer's agent. The listing agent asked them and opened the escrow. The listing agent collected and requested for the deposit to be delivered to escrow. Our buyer is performing. Our buyer is set up the loan and set up the appraisal and an inspection date. And now this listing agent is in a pickle because he opened the escrow with only one spouse's signature. The other spouse happens to be not in agreement of the sale and the price. And that other seller, the spouse husband, has an attorney, and they're approaching and having a very messy dispute and a divorce. This listing agent is now having to deal with us who are performing, and they don't have the agreement of the sellers to sell. So now we're in limbo. We're in a hostile situation. We're requesting to close escrow, to deliver our disclosures, to let us do our performance of our inspection and appraisal, and their other spouse is not allowing anything to happen. And he says, I didn't sign that contract. And now we have a dispute whether there is a valid or not invalid contract. Okay. Luckily, we are not the listing agent in that situation. We are the side that's in performance. Okay. I'll let you know how that goes. The when you clicked on the December formal lease, first I also want to show you the quick summary guide here. And so let's take a look at now. Do you guys see my tab, December forms release quick summary?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Lan. There's over 200 forms in CAR. When you go to your car library, so we never need to use all 200. These are considered our weapons, our tool belt of tools that we can utilize when needed, utilize when a situation arises or for the specific type of transaction. I've noticed they updated a lot of the businesses languages on the contract. Okay. But not many of you do a lot of business sales like a restaurant or a boba shop or whatnot. I'm not going to cover too much today on the business side of things, but just letting you know there is a new version of the business listing agreement and the disclosures and the bulk sale and the purchase contract. So you'll notice a lot of the business stuff has been modified and updated. It's because, yes, we do have one of our agents sells 20 businesses a year. Okay. So I know she's really good at what she does, and so she has more experience in businesses than I do. Anyways, just letting you know. So there is a little brief description of what the form change was. And if you, when I'm going and covering the discussion, if you want me to open up the form, just let me know and I'll open up each specific form. If you see the words new, this is telling you this is an absolutely new form that you've never seen before. And I'm going to explain and to cover all the new forms today. Okay. So we'll start from the top, from alphabetical order. Form BHIA is regarding homeowners insurance. When you open an escrow, your buyer, if you're a representing buyer, has a duty to do all of their due diligence, investigations, and satisfy themselves with the condition, property, zoning, check with the city for permits, all of that title, natural hazard. But often forgotten, your buyer also has to find and discover insurability of the property they are purchasing. So insurability means that they have to try to get quotes and estimates during their contingency period, not during the last 10 days after they remove contingencies. That's a no-no. Why? Because if you find out you've already removed contingencies and then you find out later that you can't find insurance that are willing to give you a fair, reasonable quote, that's not the seller's fault. Only if there is many, many instances of claims and they fail to report the multiple claims on their seller property questionnaire. Then it's the seller's fault for failure to disclose. Oftentimes I found that buyers try to do this at the last 10 days. They may discover that there have been some claims on the property. They may discover that the seller did not disclose these claims in their SPQ, and then you have some arguments. But if there's no claims against the property and then you still find that it's not insurable, guess what? Your buyer's stuck with maybe what's called California Fair Plan, which is a terrible, expensive, and limited fire insurance policy that will satisfy your lender's needs. But you're going to pay more premium for less coverage. So let's pull up this form. This is now bundled and automatically included. Every buyer's agent will add this automatically with your residential purchase agreement. And let's take a look at the BHIA language. So I'm going to go back into the revisions that I pulled up. And here is the BHIA. And you'll see there's really just a form here that talks about importance of obtaining property insurance, especially if you have a lender. If you're a cash buyer, you technically do not need fire insurance, but it's to your best interest to protect your asset and the structures. But if you're buying a land deal, you don't need insurance. If you're going to demolish the property to the foundation, you don't need fire insurance if you're buying cash because you're going to demolish the whole thing and whatnot. So the language here, there are conditions before issuing a policy. The insurance carriers have the right to cancel even after they issue policy. So like they can give you a quote and then suddenly 2, 3 months later, they discover the maps have changed from California, Cal Fire, and now this property is now in a fire zone. And because it's in a fire zone and they don't want to cover it, they can give you a notice of um, non-renewal or to cancel and terminate a policy, or they find that the questions that you provided during the insurance questionnaire process were false or fraudulent. There are things that gives the carrier reasons to cancel your terminate your policy, and you're going to be rushing to find a policy. So anyways, this is just now an inclusion. Only the buyer signs this because the buyer's the one who has to investigate and check with all the carriers they want with fire insurance. Definitely, if you're in the buy side, go get quotes earlier than California's FAIR Plan. Okay? Any questions on this form, BHIA? It's just letting it, we advise them to consult and find a qualified insurance professional of your choice, buyer, and find out the insurability and their costs and make sure this is done before removal of related contingency. Real estate brokers do not have expertise in this area. Perfect. I love it. No questions? Okay. Now, there's a new business listing agreement. They just basically added it so that you can have all of this, they added agency, dispute resolution, and areas to remove the arbitration clause. So it's just simple changes. You're not going to need to know too much about that. The bill of sale form is when you're selling a business and or you're selling a house. Let's pull this one up because I've done this before with a house. And if you've never used this form, I want to teach you that there is what's called purpose for this. Now, this is most often used in commercial or businesses, but this still could be used for an income property or a residential purchase agreement. For example, let's say I sell a regular house, okay? And inside the house, there's inventory of personal property. It could be something like the washer and dryer. It could be something like a furniture inside the property or staged furniture that they wish to purchase. It could be such like art pieces or inventory like I don't know, there's anything that does not consider to be a fixture of the property, but is going to be transferred to the buyer. And let's say it's an iPad and the iPad controls their window blinds and it controls their lighting. So if you're going to transfer that personal property to a buyer, it's nice to put a bill of sale together and you can specify what the inventory is, like one iPad, one art piece, 4 tables, 1 chair. And these are located in the dining room and in the wall of the master, whatever it is, wherever the location of they are. You would also say that these are following representations that this is seller makes no representation as to A to D above, meaning your seller makes no, gives to them the washer and dryer, gives them all these iPads with no warranty. I prefer that if you're a listing agent, okay? But sometimes if you're giving them the Ring doorbell and all the surveillance and all the cameras, maybe there is a warranty involved and maybe it's still under the manufacturer's warranty. Okay, you can give them a copy of that and your receipt. Okay, so you can always say disclosures with respect to the prospective seller goes the following. In my instance, I could say washer and dryer was purchased from Costco on January of December 2023. Should still be under the manufacturer's warranty. Here's a copy of the receipt. Seller makes no other representation or warranty on the washer and dryer or the tables and chairs that we're including with the sale. Now, you can or cannot have what's called a value applied for this. Most often, the value could be 0, or it could be like built into the purchase price, or maybe you want to make the value of the furniture you're providing to be aside from the purchase price. There are different reasons why you would do this, but ultimately it's for tax purposes. Okay? Make sense? And you obviously could also use this and should use this more for commercial real estate, or maybe I sold a warehouse and there was a bunch of storage racks given to the buyer and what's called a hydraulic lift to take crates from the top floor down. So if we're selling this with the property, maybe the buyer doesn't want to pay purchase. Maybe the buyer prefers to keep all of this personal property off of the sales price because they want to pay property tax on the true sales price of the real estate, and they rather create a bill of sale for all the other personal property and have that separated as maybe an expense for their business that they could write off on the year of purchase. So that's a reason why buyer would want it on a bill of sale. Okay. Any questions on the bill of sale form? Okay. Other than that, it's asking optionally to have it notarized, and you can go ahead and have the buyer and seller acknowledge this bill of sale if this is used in conjunction with a transaction with or without warranty. Good. So now, if no questions, there is a new business purchase agreement, allocation of the purchase price, separating your furniture, fixtures, and equipment into taxable and non-taxable totals. This makes it a lot more detailed for those agents who do businesses, and also a certificate of employment for each staff. When you sell a business, they have maybe 3 employees, and 3 employees could provide their kind of like a tenant estoppel. They're doing an employee estoppel certificate to confirm their salary, their benefits, their payment compensation contract terms. And this is a good form to use always if you're selling a business. Here's the FF&E itemized for each thing, whether it's taxable or not, or leased or owned personal property. So we're not going to discuss businesses like I told you, but this is a brand new form. I like that they're adding and changing and updating for businesses, because prior to this December, there was a lot of all of this was missing. Now, the commission agreement is slightly updated. I'll just pull it up just because we all love to collect our commissions and make sales. Why not learn about how and why you should use this form? Now, the commission agreement is simply a transaction in which you and the client, whoever it is, buyer or seller, agrees to pay a certain commission to you as a realtor for helping them complete a transaction. It could be a lease, it could be a sale. Okay. And this is often used when I have a direct situation of a transaction that I do not intend to put in the on the market on the MLS. Okay, so you can write any specific terms or this and this and that, and it just has acknowledgement whether it's the buyer or seller and broker signature. When have I used a commission agreement? Anyone can think of a reason when you can use a commission agreement instead of a listing agreement. Quite recently, I used it this last month because the owner does not want to sign a listing agreement. The owner asked me to assist them and the tenant I placed back in their transaction 2 years ago to renew their lease. In this situation, I'm not having a listing. I should not sign a listing contract. I'm not intending to put it in the MLS. I am simply drafting a new lease agreement and renewing it with the parties who are already in possession of the property. And so maybe I'm not going to charge a full 5% or 6%. I'm going to charge them a reduced amount to accommodate and prepare all the forms and disclosures for them to execute as a binding agreement. That's one reason you would use a commission agreement. Okay. because of all the anti-class trust lawsuits against NAR and all the real estate brokers out there, um, there are certain instances where we should be knowledgeable about how and when to use forms and how to renegotiate all commission, how to make sure we're saying all commissions are negotiable when you're trying to quote your price for the services you offer. Okay. This commission agreement could be used when I already have a transaction wrapped up. And maybe I have a buyer myself and I found a for sale by owner. And this for sale by owner obviously does not want to sign a listing contract with me. But in order for me to make sure I get paid, I would like the seller to pay me some commission for me procuring a specific buyer for their own for sale by owner transaction. I could use this form. Okay, any questions? This changes not much. It's just adding some language that entities can also sign this. And so not just a party, because sometimes there's entities involved. And that's really all it is. It adds this, the broker signature as well. Okay, simple form. Now, let's get into the next one, commercial lease agreement. Let's take a look at that because some of you do commercial here. So the CL is your commercial lease agreement form. Let me try to make it easier for you to see. Okay. I wish there was a full page option. Let me see if I can get that. Okay. So the commercial agreement, if you're renting out any property, quite recently, I actually just did this 2 days ago, where Cheryl Johnson and I helped out a client lease out a retail space in Azusa. Okay. They've added some languages, and you can see I've used the specific form right now, the commercial lease agreement. The landlord agrees to rent the premises for me, this was a partial build out of a retail space on Route 66, Glendora. Now, we comprised of roughly 30% of the square footage of the total premises. So I wrote in here 30%. I gave the address 236 East Route 66 in Glendora. And I gave them a 3-year lease term and had the tenant pay a specific rent schedule. So I used number 5, other. Okay. If you want to see what one feels out like, it's fine. I'll go ahead and share it. Okay, so from Authentisign, we signed over a little commercial lease agreement. So this is the newest form already. So it's nice to go ahead and pull it up as a reference in how I fill it out. We did a 3-year lease and the base rent to be $42.75. And we have the annual rent increases beginning on month 25. Now, when I look at the changes of what's going on, we have the red is it changes. They changed all the words to be landlord here instead of lessor. They're both interchangeable and fine. Whether you use landlord or lessor, that's fine. Tenant or lessee, that is fine when you're dealing with commercial. So there is language here that the landlord will receive the security deposit. Obviously, we agents don't want to touch the money. So I like that they added to be paid directly to the landlord. And there's red categories, rent. I like that you can charge. For my situation, I had to do that because in commercial, sometimes you have abated rent. And that happened with me. So in this situation, when I look at the rent, they have 2 months of rent payments that amounted to only 1 month. Okay. And if you don't know what that means, I added a language in my addendum. And if you read my addendum, landlord will provide 1 month rent abatement, where it's basically no charge to the tenant for the tenant to perform improvements and set up the business. So February 2024 rent shall be mutually deemed to be abated. And then so in my contract, I was able to um, put this month and the security deposit, and I added a utility deposit because in my instance, they have a shared electrical meter and a shared gas meter. So we're making um, some allocations for that deposit. So in this situation, when you're putting into your leases, and they did add landlord, that's really the only main changes you see. But I like the maintenance is changed over here. The maintenance side of tenant shall professionally maintain the premises, including HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and water systems. I like the default language because once tenants take possessions, um, they always complain, oh, the HVAC isn't working. I added even my own um situation and my own where landlord to deliver HVAC in good working condition with sufficient air ducting. So I put the landlord to deliver it and have a statement of operation and adequate airflow. But I also said once that is done, tenants shall be required to perform annual services on their own and tune-ups, change air filters at tenant expense. So for me, I'm just making it very clear. I like to write. Everyone says stuff like, Kelvin, why do you write so much stuff? I don't want to make it so complicated. To me, I like to write stuff because I want to make it clear and I want to make language that gives landlord and tenant specific types of instructions instead of guessing. So I'm the opposite. I'm very detailed and I prefer you guys to be detailed too, because when you leave it up to a blank standardized contract, there's always specific issues or details that you must customize to your own property premises that you're dealing with. So that is why it is important to check with language or ask a lot of questions, clarify things before you come into an execution. And so I rather have more time bouncing back and forth when we're negotiating the contract versus fighting over it after the contract has already been delivered. Okay. So when you look at the other differences and changes, um, tenant shall keep the glass windows and doors in operable and safe condition. Okay. I was just in another transaction with Elaine, who's here today. We have a video footage surveillance of our commercial building that's in escrow. And that property, it's a retail store. A homeless person just walked right by, picked up a giant rock boulder, threw it at the glass, and broke the windows. Um, and then just left. Okay. And then this is a duty of a tenant to maintain their glass and windows. And yes, it sucks, but at the same time, this is just part of society. We live in Los Angeles and there's a lot of homeless people and there's a lot of angry people out there. So this makes it a tenant responsibility. And um, if tenant fails to maintain the premises or keep it operable and safe as above, landlord may do so and perform such contractual needs to keep it safe and charge the tenant for the landlord's cost. So what's an example of that? Maybe the landlord notices that the tenant has unsafe conditions. And what is that? Maybe the tenant has exposed wiring that they see, or maybe there's a trip hazard, and or maybe the walkway slash stairway that they built is not to code. So if there's a trip hazard or this and this, landlord can go in, give them notice to say, hey, per paragraph 17, this is a trip hazard. You should fix this. It's unsafe. And if the tenant fails to do it after X amount of time, then the landlord can just go ahead and do it and then bill it to the tenant. That's what it means. Other than that, I'm not going to talk all the landlord areas, but you can see that they just changed all these words to landlord instead of lessor. And now you have, this is the biggest change, is construction related accessibility standards. And if I usually landlords have not inspected by a certified access specialist who can, this person professional would designate and tell you if you have any trip hazards, anything's not to code, anything that has been deemed to be unsafe, and give a report of what has or has not been made to help accessibility, handicap, and especially if you're in a retail space, you do have to have handicap ramps and access and doors and bathrooms and grab bars and handrails and elevators and that have been annually or whatever semi-annually it's been through a tune-up and inspection. You have to have fire sprinkler extinguishers that are every 2 years should be, or every 1 year should be renewed. Stuff like that. So most of the time, landlords never do it. So they have not, it's disclosed to the client, it has not been done, and tenants should take full responsibility and get it up to code for their business. Okay. Other than that, notices may be served by mail, email, or by the contact info in the section for the landlord and tenant. So those are where legally allowed notices may be given. And so that's pretty much all the changes. This whole red box is brand new too. I like that too. The landlord and tenant acknowledge brokers do not guarantee the condition, cannot verify representations, will not verify zoning and land use restrictions, cannot provide legal or tax advice, will not provide other advice or information regarding education or experience required to obtain a license. So all of this stuff helps write a normal necessary disclaimer. And I like this in all of your transactions. Okay. It's nice to acknowledge that you are not a legal tax or insurance person, and they should be going to their own professionals. Okay. So that's all of the changes to the commercial lease agreement. Any questions? Am I boring you, or should I just go straight to anywhere that you want me to go if you're limited on time? So when you're in commercial, there is a confidentiality and non-disclosure agreement. So we call this an NDA in our agreement. Basically, I like to use this form when there's specific situations of confidentiality. Letting you know what it is. It's called CML. Dash CNDA. I opened the wrong one. Now, just giving you an idea, we do have a confidentiality, commercial, non-disclosure, non-compete type of contract. There has been some changes made in red, and these are just all improvements to the contract. And all I just really want to say about this thing here is teach you when to use it. Let's say I have a commercial property, like a listing, and I have three strip center retail. Okay. Now, there are sensitive information that I have in my possession. Number one, it could be the lease contracts themselves with each of these three different tenants. These are sensitive information. What is the expenses that I have with the property? That's sensitive information from the landlord. What are the utility bills? What are the amounts of rent charged and per square footage? That is why you don't want to put all of the sensitive information online, because I've seen many instances where a tenant finds out their building is for sale. And then they research it, they look online, and then they look at, oh, yeah, space A is charged $2 a square foot. Space B is $2 a square foot. Space C is $2 a square foot. Why am I space D paying $3 a square foot? That's unfair. I don't even have the best location. I don't even have the best parking. And then they discover all of this sensitive information from agents who put it online. And then now this tenant wants to renegotiate or tries to find ways to, um, maybe certain other tenants have more favorable terms to their condition. Maybe it's disclosed that this tenant got 6 months of rent abatement and space D got 0 months of rent abatement. Whatever it is, when you give confidential information like tax returns, or because I'm a buyer's agent and I had to provide social security numbers, tax returns, business financials and tax returns, business bank statements, I gave all these things to the other party. So that situation, I want to deliver and ask for confidentiality of all of these stuff. That gives the party who's providing the information recourse against the person who may use this against them or share it with others. Okay, so that's the purpose of why you would use an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Okay, a lot of times landlord wants to put a property for sale on the market, but doesn't want to put it in the MLS. They only want it to be seen by CoStar or LoopNet, and in which all of the information provided, they want to make sure you sign an NDA before they provide any sensitive information like what the expenses are, what the rent roll looks like, what the income expense statements are like, the vacancy, all that stuff. Okay. So that's what an NDA is for. Great, great tool. Use it. There's other commercial forms in here. So I'm not going to talk about all the commercial revisions here. They just reviewed it. So there's no major changes, but they did review it for accuracy. Um, we're not going to talk about short sale or HUD notice to purchasers. Sure, let's talk about HUD notices to purchasers. That's form HID. Okay, so let me go back into HID. Just remember, whenever you're purchasing a property that's a HUD provided financing, which is FHA loans, every FHA transaction, you need to give this form HID that, hey, why you need a home inspection? Be informed. What is the inspection? Okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so very simple. It's just advising buyers to perform a home inspection and provide all of these disclaimers that what teaching an FHA buyer about the process of buying a property or home. So you should have no problem resistance getting your buyer, if you're FHA, to sign this. Okay? There's nothing much to discuss. This is simple guidance, extra guidance. Okay? FHA buyers always use this. Now, we don't have agents that do loan broker sales, so I'm not going to really talk about this. Now, there is a screening fee change for those of you who do rentals and rent out homes. So let's take a look at LRA. I also actually just completed this with another client, and the application to rent has a small change. Obviously, I like this form. I use it and I add it with my rent spree screening process. So that way I don't have to make any extra steps. Like it's just, hey, fill out the information online. Here's the link. They can put in their employment history and income and bank accounts. The only change you'll see on the screening fee is down here. The applicant, the tenants, they could go ahead and either provide the money to me and I can have it paid by myself. but oftentimes I don't even do that. I just have Rent Scurry collect the fee themselves. And so I leave it all blank. The checkbox here, C, is good for the applicant to provide the social security number to the housing provider so that the landlord does know what their taxpayer ID is. And it's already on the application to rent right here, social security number. See paragraph 2C for social security number, right? So when you put that there, applicant shall provide it. So if you look at the old drafts, they would have social security number to be inputted in here. And guess what happens? Number one, people tend to get their emails hacked. Realtors are victimized. People come into our emails and get into our inbox. Okay. There has been many cases in which, because some people use AOL or Yahoo and they do not have double layer of encryption for sign in or whatnot, these older emails often are very targeted, and a hacker spammer can come in, look at all of your applications that you put in your inbox and you never deleted it. And guess what? Now they have a whole bunch of sensitive information easily found in your inbox mail, whether you sent it out or whether you received it as a listing landlord agent. And guess what? Now they have access to all of these applications and social security numbers, and it is the fault of you who owned the email address that now they are targeting and attacking these people and doing scams against them, and you could be held liable or at fault for not protecting sensitive information. They took out this social security number off of this. They should be providing it maybe on a separate form or verbally, or just write it in with the landlord on the whatever later on. But it used to be on there. Now it is saying applicants shall provide it later. Okay. That's the only change on the application to rent. Moving on down, mortgage relief notice is more regarding people who are looking for forbearance or looking for a short sale or a postponement of their payment plan. So I'm not going to talk about that part. Manufactured home dealer addendum. Anytime you're selling a mobile or manufactured home, or in a trailer or in a community, there's a new disclosure addendum to provide. Modification of listing. Okay. Now there's a statutory limit. Whenever you renew a listing, let's say you put 2 years. If you're going to modify and extend that listing another third year, that's fine. You cannot do any modification of terms that exceed 12 months. That's the only other change. Any questions on that? So they just added another disclaimer right here. Listing agreements or a seller reserved listing. This listing cannot last longer than 12 months for any modification renewal. Okay. It does not apply if it's a corporation entity like an LLC or partnership. Only for the individuals really is applicable. And then they added the same language that you cannot use this modification of terms to put a lien or recorded the listing agreement with the county recorder's office. I want to point out two very important forms for those of you who have a personal assistant or your own personal transaction coordinator, or you hire your own child or a relative, or you have what's called the employee. Any of those situations applies. Great. Let's talk about two forms. One is called the personal assistant contract, and the other one is going to be called a TPA, TPA right here, three-party agreement. Okay, I'm going to go to the first one, but I wanted to point these two forms out because they do have good language for you to understand and have what's called the employment agreement with limitations and guidance regarding real estate. So cool. Even our state CAR board is helping realtors build contracts with your personal assistant. Let's take a look at it. So we have a PAC draft here. And hopefully you can see it. I know it's not large, but you can always pull it up. Now, first of all, let's describe what is an unlicensed or licensed assistant, because they could be both. You can have an assistant, like someone's, I hire my child to go and pass out mailers and put stamps on things, or to help me with my marketing, whatever it is. So yes, that type of my child might be unlicensed assistant, but I could also hire someone who is licensed to be my personal assistant. So there is language to cover these bases. So if they hold a license, you would check assistant does or does not hold a license in California in real estate. Okay. Relationship. The assistant. Okay, this is between you, associate licensee, and your staff or employee. This is what your agreement with them, not involving the broker. Okay, this is the contract to use. What is your relationship? Well, the assistant is at will. They're an employee of the agent only. This means that either party may terminate this agreement at any time with or without cause. The employer, the licensee, salesperson, shall overtime pay, time keep requirements, income and employment tax withholdings, workers' comp, all of that stuff, and fair, no unfair employment, housing, or discrimination. There, everything is going to be, you guys are going to do is going to be in compliance with the state laws and local laws. So if you do that, you guys are desiring to enter classification of any person who performs services, and you guys are declaring to be probably doing it as an independent contractor, there may be significant legal consequences for both the licensee, salesperson, you, and the staff employee you perform if you decide to misclassify that person as an independent contractor. Many of you are hiring your employees as an independent contractor. You're saying, no, I don't have any required hours. I don't have any required work hours. They can work at their own time. So therefore, they're independent. Technically, yes or no. There's a lot of different tests whether they are independent contractor. If you designate a specific outfit or a uniform, or they have to dress up to open houses and they have to do a specific tasks for you, there are instances in which if they got to drive places, they have to go pick up some documents or keys, or they have to meet a seller for a signature, whatever it is that you're describing in your work role. And let's say you put a time frame, you got to do this before 4 o'clock today, assistant. Because you put some time components into some things, it's not truly independent. And if there's an employment agency and there's a dispute between you and your employee, guess what happens? They may discover that you are violating independent contractor tests, and both of you, usually it's the employer, will be liable for all these violation, the fees and penalties imposed for misclassifying your independent contractor, and it should have been an employee with proper deductions, with a W-2 income, with state reported Social Security, and you providing some benefits for them. All that stuff, which we don't like to do. Make sure you're doing your duties within the tests of independent contractors. Lastly, make sure you and your unlicensed assistant reads the DRE guidelines for unlicensed assistants. You can find this very easily. Just Google it and you'll find this DRE, Department of Real Estate Guidelines. Okay? Here's where you describe the following activities, like holding open house or reviewing contracts and disclosures, marketing, social media, whatever it is, you could describe the roles here, duties. You can also put it on a C attached addendum and all of your roles and duties and responsibilities on another piece of paper. And my advice to you, have your own legal attorney review your independent contractor agreement if that's the way you're choosing, if because most of you are opting that way. Have them review your agreement with your licensee to ensure it meets the state of California laws and regulations for independent contractor tests, and if your contract is good, and then you can go ahead and have it executed. What is your compensation, guys? $20 an hour. Okay. Are you gonna pay it bi-weekly or are you gonna do it the first of every month? Okay, what up to you? Are you paying it per hour in semi-monthly installments, like the first and the 15th? You go ahead and check the box that applies to your situation. Expenses shall be reimbursed. Assistants shall not be entitled to any advances. Deductions are authorized for Medicare, federal, and state income withholding taxes. So the employer, if you're choosing to put him as a W-2, has the authority to make deductions on the employee's behalf. And here's your vacation policy with the rate of, I don't know, whatever, 20 hours per pay period or 40 hours work weeks. And they get a maximum of X amount of days per year for paid vacation. So it's good to review who's paying for the auto insurance and workers' comp. Here's the information to fill out. And errors and omissions, okay? Our brokerage does cover you on your E&O insurance for your transactions. However, it may not cover errors and omissions caused by your failure to supervise your employee, fraudulent stuff, and that could be a huge no-no. So here's one example I could think of right now. You put your assistant to help you with TC work, and your TC goes out and tries to complete the disclosures with the seller and sends it out for e-signing, and then they send it out to themselves, to their own secondary email. And maybe they over the phone, this assistant is talking to the seller, it gets the summary, explanation, and it said, okay, seller, you don't have to sign anything. I'm the assistant of Kelvin. I'm gonna go ahead and I'll put it all on a piece of paper and then I'll do it myself for you. We discussed this. Number one, your assistant is doing licensed activity, which is a no-no. Number two, they end up sending it to their own email, and then they're filling out all the information on behalf of the seller. And the assistant thinks they're doing good because they're taking care of it and resolving it, and they're helping the client get it done. And they maybe asked a few questions over the phone. All I'm telling you is, if this were to come into a complaint, and then the buyer sues for failure to disclose, or they sue for fraud or concealment, guess what? It will be discovered that the e-signing, because ZipLogic's CAR has to honor subpoenas, requests for documents, and a transactional transcript. And then ZipForms will provide the email address, the timestamp, and date of who signed that TDS and SPQ. They'll find out it was signed by tcassistant@gmail.com. And then our errors and omission may not cover this transaction because it turned out it was fraudulent signing. So you might lose your coverage by not supervising or not checking on or doing your work. And so I'm just telling you, this is an area to understand. that every insurance company has their limitations, and they always try to not pay out claims. So do everything you can to be in good standing. Any questions? Other things is just know that there are other great supplemental forms. If you have an assistant, um, we already have what's called our own independent contractor agreement. So that is something we've signed, you and I together. Now there is a third party, three-party agreement I'm going to show you. There is a broker's office policy manual, and this is available in the broker's office. I do have a hard copy and a soft copy electronically in our Team Dynasty resources page. Dynasty Agent Resources is all there. And there's a guidelines for unlicensed assistants. Check those boxes so that you make sure the tenant, I mean the staff and you have read it. And then you guys go ahead and sign your agreement as you guys see best fit. Okay. So that's the agreement for assistance. But let me go back into the form TPA, third party agreement, in which the assistant is still in an associate license agreement with the agent. The assistant does or does not have a real estate license. Okay. What this does here is it adds the broker as a three-party, as an agreement to this to your relationship with your assistant. And to me, and from Coldwell Banker Dynasty standpoint, the only person currently that this should be used for would be if you use our receptionist for your transaction coordinator, then we can go ahead and agree to this agreement because she is working for you as a TC, but she's also working for the brokerage as a receptionist, and it involves all of us. Okay. So if you're doing TC work with our staff, we can go ahead and sign this form, three parties between broker, agent, and our and our transaction coordinator. Yes. I will not sign this for any of your personal assistants, like if you have a son, daughter, nephew, or maybe just you hire your own employee. I'm not involved in that relationship you are established in your business. Okay? Any questions on that one? So moving on down, a realtor acknowledgement. Okay. I'm just gonna briefly show you because none of you have probably ever opened up the realtor acknowledgement. This is a simple one-page reminder. I'll call it a reminder. Now, realtors, just reminding you, agents, you are held to a higher level of standard of professionalism by our parent association, CAR. CAR, in order to be a realtor, you must subscribe to the code of ethics. You must abide by the rules and uphold the code of ethics that NAR and all realtors agree to. And just a reminder, realtors, we have a pledge and they can view it and you can read the code of ethics and it's updated every year or two or so. So you can review the standards of practice. And if you believe someone has violated the code of ethics, realtors can go to another realtor association and ask for discipline, file a complaint, or whatnot. So anyway, this form is just between you and really just us as broker. We can have and give this to you. I'm going to be adding this to our hiring forms, and ultimately it's just reminders. Okay. You're going to serve clients ethically, and it tells you you will agent, you will contact me immediately if we can resolve any matters in which you believe there's a client that's dissatisfied for any reason. I hope that you talk to my broker, get me involved if you're in a situation or a matter or a complaint. Okay? That's it. I'm moving on to the REO advisory listing. If you are taking REOs, it just adds areas that to allow for trust and probate checkbox forms. So nothing major changes there. Does anyone want me to look at it? If not, I'll skip on. Radon gas and mold. You'll notice this is usually done in rental agreements. But you can also use this if you know you're in a radon gas area. I haven't checked the chat box. Any questions you guys have? Okay, nothing. Good. So we already looked at the listing agreement, guys. Basically, it just says your listing contract, if it's individuals, maximum is 2 years. There is an updated residential listing agreement open listing. Okay. I don't like you guys taking open listings, but I prefer an open listing versus no listing. So if you are ever getting into an open listing, just let me know so I can help guide you or teach you a few things on protection of yourself and your commission. But the reason why I don't like open listings is because sellers often try to find a way to circumvent the agents. A lot of times a for sale by owner might give you an open listing. It allows you to advertise and market the property, and then they'll find out the buyer's information and they're going to cut you out of the deal. Okay. Or they'll have their other friend realtor draft up the document and boom, they try to cut the agent out of the deal. Okay. Seller reserved listing. Have you ever you guys used a seller reserved listing? What is a seller reserved listing? Anyone know? Well, that's why it's a good thing you're here. A seller reserved listing here is it is a listing contract. You still have the standard 10 elements of a contract required. That makes it a valid contract, like identifying the property, identifying a price, a term, an expiration date, an address, an APN number. So anyways, if you're going to do a seller reserved listing, is the commission, everything looks the same. Not much difference from the regular listing. You still have a duty to present offers and present love letters or not present buyer love letters. So when do you use a reserved listing? Notice this is not an exclusive listing. That's the first point to point out. Okay. You would use this situation when the seller has specific reservations that they want to limit their listing. Okay. Um, let me try to give you the best example. To me, the primary way and reason you would use a reserve listing um, is going to be when you have a situation, for example, uh, maybe I want to have a reserved listing for the purposes of I have already identified and entertained and a specific set number of procured buyers by myself as a seller. Okay. So, um, one example would be, hey, I have 4 people that I already showed this property to. I have these 4 individual names who may be purchasers and bona fide purchasers. And these 4 people I do not, if I sell it to these four people, I do not owe you a commission, and I do not have uh, this is an exclusive listing, but seller reserves to sell directly to these purchasers, buyers, without any obligation or pay compensation to Coldwell Banker Dynasty. And that is why you would own pretty much use this form only. Is when the seller has a specific set of purchasers that they've already shown and entertained and wish to keep off of the broker's uh exclusive listing. Okay, so that's when you would use this. Okay, any questions? Go back. There's a residential la lease or month to month. I'm gonna pull that up because we are often dealing with the month to month lease agreement. So let's pull up this contract. And if you have any questions at all, please type or talk to me because I've been just talking and talking, and I don't know if I'm losing you, and I don't know if you're still following and you're happy. But here is your normal lease agreement. Nothing red changes except a few things near the end. Here is periodic pest control is a red change. So here in G, tenant shall pay for who's going to pay for pest control? The landlord or the tenant shall pay for periodic pest control. For me, as a landlord, I would prefer the tenant pay for it and have that their contractual duty. Why? Because the tenants are usually the one causing these pests to come in. Usually, they have a lot of maybe ants or cockroaches or flies, and they leave food out or whatnot, and then it's causing them to intrude into the house. So that's why I usually like the tenant to pay. But there is a reason why the landlord should pay for it, and that's if there's subterranean termites. Maybe you have a toilet or you have a drain and it's causing a small short leak. Drop, drop, drop. If that leakage is continuing to be ongoing, that moisture attracts subterranean termites and or rats, mouse. And because of the fault of the property, maybe that's where the housing provider should probably pay for the leak repair and termite subterranean and spray for that poison. Okay? So that's the only other change is to designate whom to pay for the pest control, if any. And if you look down here, there's some red language here. Insurance. Tenant shall obtain liability insurance at no less than X. Um, and it shall name the housing provider and property manager, if applicable, as an additional additional insured, in basically to protect the landlord and property manager. So it's good to have the client obtain liability insurance or renter's insurance, okay, to protect their private to protect their personal property. Number two is to protect from any liability or claims, like someone trips and falls or the movers damage something or get injured in a house, there's a head injury, whatever it is. So that way, if that liability event happens and there's a trip and fall, the landlord is covered under the renter's insurance or the manager is covered under the renter's insurance and not having to use the landlord's insurance policy. Okay? So that's good language for landlords. But guess what? Maybe the first year the tenant does this And then the second year, they change providers to a new renter's insurance, and they don't do this. Okay. It is your duty as a landlord to obtain the new renewal policy premium. Is also the duty of the tenant to provide it. But guess what, guys? They don't provide it up front. They wait for the landlord to complain and ask for it. Okay. So if you're not asking as a landlord, you're not doing your management well as a landlord. You're not keeping your tenant in compliance as well. Now, receipt, city, county, or other local requirement. This is a new paragraph that all rental agreements are subject to local and county requirements, such as rent stabilization or similar board, like the LA Board of Rentals. So when you put together a contract, it's the tenant and landlord's duties to also abide by the local restrictions, ordinances in place. And that is important because we all know that if you have any multifamily, 2 units and up, these are all subject to statewide rent control. Okay. So by changing and adding that paragraph, every other clause is now jumped up to one more higher. So you see 50 and 51, and that's the rest of the changes for the lease contract. Very easy. Okay. Now, request for repairs. Let's look at the request for repairs form real quick. The request for repairs is often used when you're trying to negotiate for credits or repairs. Whether you're the buyer or seller, you need to know the small change here that on the seller's response, the seller can agree to all of that buyer requests, the partial, okay? And they would say, I agree to all of them except number 2 and number 3. Or you can say, instead, I could choose partial response. Instead of agreeing to do some repair, maybe I just say, I will partially agree. I'm just going to only agree to credit the buyer $2,000 at close of escrow. Okay. Or reduce the price by $2,000. That's it. But number 4 is added for other. This is where you get to specifically write out any instructions or details. And I'm just going to give you again, it's just in case, because this is a learning environment. Why would I use other? I always use other because I want to write disclaimers and hold harmless language. Okay? So what is an example of that? I call it addendum RRRR. Okay? So in this situation of addendum RRRR, I want to give you both sides of what I was doing. I have it on paper, but I like it in I'm trying to show it to you in the contract itself. So I'm gonna pull up 809 Meridian because this is my own transaction. I think that's Meridian. Let me see. Okay, so I used this strategy in my own transaction. The buyer had a request for repairs. Okay. Let me see if I can pull up the buyer's request for repair. Yes, here it is. At this time of last year, request for repairs in this condominium in South Pass. Buyer requests seller to fix 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. They gave me a home inspection report and signed it. And what did we do? We said we are going to respond to the form RRRR. Okay. So what do we do? Here's our, from the seller, here's the RRRR. At close of escrow, we're going to credit the buyer $250, credit to buyer. Then I attached two portions of responses. One is called addendum RR for seller's response to the repair request for repairs. Okay, I know it's confusing, but let me explain to you. So what did I do? I put together addendum RR. This is number one. Okay. Property to be sold as is condition. Upon buyer's investigation, buyer submitted the request for repairs, sellers providing a good faith response. One, seller did not possess the manuals, blah, blah, blah. Number two, so I went one by one per their questions. And I addressed them. Yes, HVAC receipt of recent service will be supplied. Sellers not have any more casement window handles. Seller will provide, but seller will provide and address this with a credit to buyer, $250. Home Depot has the standard part in stock, and buyer may buy their own handles. So I gave them the butterfly windows that they wanted. Seller does not have remodeling invoices. Balcony repair is a recent issue. Standalone cannot provide anything in writing. And I gave them the HOA manager to talk to regarding balcony repairs. Bedroom window has been closed. I showed them how to close it. They just didn't, they thought it was some weather stripping issue. Seller would not repair this. So anyways, the reason why I add addendum RR is because I always want to have a language which is on this bottom. In review of all repairs requested, as well as the short timing of the escrow period, seller will address the concerns with a 250 credit to buyer. With buyer's acceptance of this RRRR, buyer removes all the contingencies and be deemed to be fully satisfied with their investigations of the property, and they have completed all own due diligence. Buyer shall hold harmless the seller, the brokers, for above requested items and be fully responsible for condo maintenance after the close of escrow. So even though my seller didn't want to give anything at all, I says, give him some money, give him a credit. I'd pay for this paragraph. And it's well worth it to have liability protections and extra buyers fully satisfied language, because in an event of a dispute, I have one greater document in my arsenal of what's called the broker retention files. I have this to protect us from buyer claims. Okay. And I don't mind if I got to credit $250 or $1,000 or $10,000. Whatever it is, you want to have extra ammunition of protection language for every deal you're working out, not simply just a lazy agent would just provide form RRRR and just give them the response and just put $250 credit to buyer and not check other. Okay, I'm done. Here's your $250, guys. And then they don't have any extra protections in place. So for me, I did that and I attached addendum RR. On top of that, on top of that, I do another addendum as well. The other addendum that I do would be whatever number we're at the transaction. Maybe it's addendum number 2. I don't like, sometimes the lender does not want to see a list of repairs needed to be at the property. So when when the lender sees all these issues, window cannot fully close, the corroded emergency water shut off in the kitchen sink, this could scare a lender underwriter. So for that purpose, instead of responding and providing the lender the $250 credit or whatever agreement of the condition of the defects, I would draft up just addendum number 2. Seller and buyer mutually agree to reduce the purchase price by $250. All other terms and conditions remain the same. Such $250 shall be applied towards buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing costs. And that's the only thing I give to address the negotiations that we and the listing agent and the buyer's agent had together regarding repairs. But I only want the lender to understand that this is a credit towards repairs and non-recurring closing, not towards repairs, it's towards buyer's recurring and non-recurring closing costs. Does that make sense? So that is what I do in my transactions, and trying to, just get things going through without causing more lender conditions or clarification questions. I try to make it easier. So you can go ahead and say $250 and other and addendum number 2 plus addendum RRR for that request for repair form. So that's just the revision. Some of you may or may not use a business name. Okay. One of our agents, like for example, Sylvia Ramos and her husband, Mark, use the Ramos Group as their team name. If you are going to have a team name and you're going to use it, then you want to make sure you have this little fictitious business name disclaimer language. Do you own this name, the Ramos Group? Did you file it with the state of California and or with the county of Los Angeles to be able to use the Ramos Group as an authorized entity? Because technically you're supposed to file and deliver to the Department of Real Estate any application of any fictitious business name that does not meet the DRE's standard language. Okay. And what do I mean by that? The Department of Real Estate, if you're using your name or last name, then it's easily identifiable, then you don't need to do the filing with the DRE. But if you're going to use anything that does not have your personal name, or you're going to legally record with the county office the name such as Super Realtor or San Gabriel Valley's top realtors team, whatever you're going to want to create as a name, then you have to do and follow all of the licensing requirements with the department and the county. Okay. So if you want to have a cool name, make sure you're meeting the DRE guidelines. The single party compensation agreement, you can use this whenever you lease or sell a property. And this is also a good form to use in the situation of one-sided agency. What does that mean? I don't know. In such situations, you guys might strike a deal where you have a listing, you're representing the seller, and then the buyer says, I have no agent and I don't want to pay so much. I'm willing to self-represent myself as a buyer. I know there's risk of not using an agent, but I want my price. So if that's what you're having in this situation, the single party agency, I would rather you provide this single property compensation agreement with the seller. There's all this language has been changed in red. You see this? okay? And you could be representing either side, okay? Let's just say you're representing the seller only. Don't forget, if there is a form called buyer non-agency, okay? So if I go into here, hopefully they'll have it. It's form B and A. Because we're on this topic, I just want to make sure we're discussing that anytime you're representing one party, but you're doing the communications and paperwork for two parties, use the appropriate buyer non-agency or seller non-agency disclosure form that basically indicates I'm helping you guys, but I'm only representing and I have a fiduciary to one side. And that's where my allegiance is at. Okay. So I closed on this property on Center Street. I'll show you what it looks like. The form B and A is exactly what it says, buyer non-agency agreement. The other form is called SNA, seller non-agency agreement. So anytime you're only representing one of these sides, but you're helping do the work for both, slash like disclosures, paperwork, contracts, leasing. So in this situation, buyer non-agency, okay? Seller is represented by, and this should be Coldwell Banker Dynasty, Kelvin Chang, right? And the other broker, I would probably say buyer self-representation. I would not check it. And then buyer is represented by another broker, or buyer is not at a time represented by another broker. Buyer has a right to enter an agency at any time during negotiation transaction regarding the property at buyer's own expense. And then buyer signs and acknowledges that they are not represented. By understand and agree. Seller land broker does not represent them. Okay. Everything that I do is for the benefit of the seller, landlord exclusively. And this is the same thing with the seller non-agency agreement, except it's just vice versa. So if I show you the seller non-agency agreement, I don't even know if you see the screen or not. Do you guys see it? I'll try anyways. This is what the seller non-agency looks like. I represent the buyer only. Hey, seller, you have no representation. Seller is not at time represented by another broker. Maybe I found this seller on my own. This seller says, I don't need an agent. If you get me $900,000, I'll sell my property to your buyer. Your buyer pays your own commission. I don't need an agent. I can just you do the paperwork and I'll sign it and I'll read it. Okay. So in this situation, if the buyer is seller has no agency, I could check whether the buyer will pay my commission or whether the seller will pay my commission with pursuant to a written agreement. Or maybe you're dealing with a listing agent who says, I'm a limited agent, I'm on MLS only. So I need to go negotiate for my own commission from the seller from an MLS only listing. They can do that. Okay. And then you go ahead and sign who pays the commission. Any questions? So going back to my transactions, let's go ahead and understand that SPQ. Here is a new language on that disclosure. And the SPQ here has the seller's normal, customary disclosures to a buyer. And the only change in red you see here, does the structure have an ADU? Yes or no? Do you have knowledge of this? If yes, to D, has the ADU received a permit? Yes or no? And do they have separate utilities and meters? And no. If you find that they don't have separate meters, it's very likely this ADU is non-permitted or was constructed and grandfathered a long time ago. If you see separate meters, it's very likely to be permitted, okay? Because it takes a lot of steps to get both meters nowadays. That's the only other change. Whether the property was originally constructed as a manufactured or mobile home is another other question. I've seen that come through when it came down to insurance, and then they had a problem getting insurance for a manufactured house that has been taken off of its basically placed a foundation on there. Anyway, that's a different story. But anyway, that's the only other changes to the SPQ. More questions for the seller to answer. The next change is seller's purchase of replacement property. So let's pull that SPRP form up and we're almost done, guys. The SPRP, here we go. The seller's purchase allows time, right here in red. Seller has, by default, 17 days to have a contingency to find a replacement property. So once they found it, they have 17 days, hopefully, to find, identify, and hopefully enter into a contract. Okay? If you're representing the seller, you also want to be able to close on that replacement property too. So make that a condition. Okay? We don't want our sellers to be homeless and have nowhere to go because the closing property that they identified happens to be tenant occupied and they won't leave until June after the school year, and now your seller's homeless. You want to have a contingency that is subject to the close of that replacement property, and hopefully your agreement is spelled out properly that it's to be delivered vacant and whatnot, so that way you can actually go from one house to another. Cancellation of possibility. If that replacement property happens to be canceled, seller has 2 days notice to give buyer that it's being canceled, and now we're stuck with our contingency to find another one. Okay. If buyer and the 17 days passes, buyer can go ahead and issue a notice to seller to perform, to remove that contingency, or you guys can continually take it week by week by week. Okay. And that's it. That's your SPRP form. Use this as if you have a condition or requirement where the seller needs to move somewhere else. Any questions? Guess what, guys? For those of you who are doing short-term rentals, there's now a contract for us to use. Okay, so I'm surprised to see it. Here's the short-term rental agreement or a seasonal addendum to the rental agreement, like maybe the season of the holidays, like Big Bear is often busy right now. Oh, Big Bear has a bunch of snow poured on them, and now is a great time to have a snow cabin because now it's all what you call powder. So if you're gonna do a 7-day Airbnb or short-term rental agreement, but it's not necessarily with Airbnb, guess what? If you're gonna do a 29-day or less, you're gonna go ahead and have what your arrival day and time and departure limits, booking deposits, taxes that are being imposed. There's various types of language to cover cancellations and refunds. This contract does never ever say tenant. It's very important never to label or classify them as a tenant. They don't get tenant rights because it's 29 days or less. So they always call them an occupant. And the occupant needs to, they'll have all this kind of language like no smoking and standard, no holdover. And if you do holdover is when they stay on the property beyond, like they don't turn the possession back over to you as the landlord. That's a holdover, and they continue to keep there, then you could charge them 1.5 times the daily rent. Late checkout, you can impose 50% extra fee. Cleaning fees, whether you have condo rules, like you should supply the rules and regulations of the HOA, such as like quiet hours or noise restrictions or usage of the pool type of language, whatever the HOA has. And now you have a contract to share for short-term rentals. Seasonal would be used for longer than 29 days. And so this SA would be the one for seasonal usages. This would be between 31 and 90 days. Maybe the summertime you want to rent out a Hawaii summer house for 90 days. Great. Use this seasonal one. Okay? And maybe you have a rental listing for short term. Maybe your landlord wants you to rent things out for 29 days or 30 days or less. So you would use this one to have the listing agreement with that landlord. You can still get paid. It does not need to be 5% of the short-term rental. That payment could be whatever your agreement is, such as a flat rate of $500 or $1,000 per rental, whatever it is. There's a transaction cover sheet. They updated that a little bit. You have an updated tenant estoppel certificate. Anytime you sell a rental property, it's good to have a tenant estoppel confirming with the tenant what is the general utilities and services and who pays for what. So they just reformatted it to make it easier in the grid format for these three categories: terms, utilities, and services and appliances. Tenant occupied property. Always use this form anytime you sell a property with a tenant. This is definitely great to have. And legal requirements such as what is the amount of security deposits, if any, held. I do see one question. Someone says, hi, regarding the FHDS form, who should be provided this form after acceptance? Listing agent or selling agent? Could you elaborate about the FHDS? Great, I will. The first answer is it's the landlord, it's a seller listing agent's duty for the FHDS. What is that? That is the fire hardening and defensible space requirement. FHDS, do you guys see my zip forms library right now? Hopefully you guys see it. Okay. This is a completed transaction. And since I was a listing agent, I did include it. It was my duty to provide it. And in this one, FHDS, let's pull it up. In this specific transaction, who's to provide this? The owner. Okay. It asks a couple of questions. Hey, everyone. In California, there's some home fire hardening disclosures and requirements, especially duties. If you're an owner within a high fire zone, you have extra duties of home ownership and maintaining defensible space to protect your neighborhood. Seller, if you are in a fire zone, you have the following answers to give to the buyer, whether you have taken any features to prevent fire hazards. So they would answer yes or no. The seller should or should not have notify the buyer whether or not there is managed ordinance like weed abatement or defensible space requirements, and you have to check on your NHD report. Okay, so let me say if your NHD report says you are not in a high or very high fire zone, you don't have to answer anything in number 2. Your seller does not have to answer anything in number 3, nothing in number 4. Just have your seller sign and get the buyer to sign, acknowledge receipt. If you are in a fire zone, yes, you do have to answer number 2. And for number 3, you need all 3 conditions of paragraph 1B to be met in order to use 3 and answer those areas. What are the 3 conditions? Okay, it says 1B. Well, here are the conditions. You are required, if you are a seller, that is, this property is 1 to 4 units, okay, that's one condition. Yes, we are a 1 to 4. The seller, are you required to complete a TDS? In my situation, they did. That's met. If the property is in a high or very high fire zone, yes, okay, then I have to answer number 3. And number 3 has to be completed in a very normal situation. But maybe if you have an exempt seller, like it's a irrevocable trust, power of attorney sale, where someone inherited, a beneficiary inherited it, or they're an authorized representative and they're a surviving or successor trustee and they never lived on the property. Those are all conditions in which number 3 does not have to be met, but number 2 does, right here. Okay? So then you would have to fill out all of number 3. And number 4 only applies, I think, as if you're in a high, very high fire zone, plus you've already done a report on it. Okay? Shanae, do you have any other questions regarding that, or you want me to go in more in detail? So why do I ask, and why, in terms of elaborating more on this form? This is to inform a buyer whether or not there is local vegetation ordinances, basically people who come out and check for inspection and compliance. Many areas do, in the high fire zones, do have some ordinance. And my advice to you, no matter whether you are in if you're on the listing side, I would make this a buyer responsibility to investigate. And by default, it says no local ordinance. If you do know that there is a seasonal inspections in effect, and they come and do weed abatement or notices to cut your trees or prevent fire embers and all that stuff, still make it a buyer responsibility. And the only difference between 2 and 3 is when the city does not have a pre-sale requirement, and this is when the city does have a pre-sale requirement. So let's just say you're in the Azusa area and you're very, very north of Foothill and you're right at the foothills of Azusa. They have a city requirement to do pre-sale inspection. It's called the RPR report. So if you have a house in the high fire zone and they did have a huge fire during the big wildfires there, this box should be checked. But if you're in Glendora, just one city over, and you're still in the high fire zone, but they do not have a city compliance as a pre-sale inspection, then you would check Glendora right here in box 3. Okay? I still make it the buyer responsibility to investigate and know. All right. Shanae says she understands now. Okay, great. Awesome. It typically only will be a seller responsibility if your seller already has a violation and the seller will obtain the compliance and the seller says, I'll do it. Don't worry. I don't want you to renegotiate on my price. I'll take care of this compliance myself. All I got to do is redo my gutters, change my windows from this to this type of material. And I got to create some crawl space between my shed and my house. So depending on your seller, who probably already has a report, they'll do their agreement or not. All right. So we covered that. Now going on to the next section, we talked about third-party agreements, the water consuming plumbing fixtures. This is now just called a notice. It's just now called an advisory. Okay, so it's an advisory. Same thing. If this form is only to be used when sellers exempt from the TDS, since the water heater statements is still required statutorily when there's an exempt seller. Okay. Form AOAA. I've used this before. And I want you to understand one thing, and then we'll end today's training. So let me go to AOAA and explain how people are using this form. AOAA is truly what you call an assigning of the contract. 99% of the time, it's on the buyer side, and the buyer is assigning the contract. Let's say you went into escrow with the buyer, and now that buyer wishes to do a couple of different things. Either A, they want to change it from their individual names into their own trust. Great. Okay, it's probably the same buyer names and it's maybe a couple and they want to put it in their trust. Great, that's fine. If they want to put it and assign it to the LLC or a business name or whatever, whatnot, corporation, that's also when you use this form. But the most common type I'm seeing right now is when there's a lot of flippers out there who are writing cash offers on your listings. And then what are they doing? They're procuring a buyer to purchase and complete the purchase with their existing agreement. So they are usually chasing down stale, long days on market listings or fixers or properties that are distressed, and it's hard to get financing. These buyers will submit a cash offer and give themselves 3 or 5 day due diligence period, and they'll write a contract, all cash, very clean, 12, 15-day escrow, 5 day investigation period, no loan, no appraisal contingency. They close it cash. But what are they doing really is they're going to be putting it into a contract. They deliver a EMD. Usually they don't write 3% EMDs, guys. They write 1% or $10,000. And then they open the escrow. They have a valid contract. They will assign this to a third party. Maybe they have a group of investors. They have their own emails, forum of sending deals to investors or overseas clients. And then they find procure a buyer to purchase it greater than their purchase price. So what do? They sell it. They assign it and sell this contract to let's say an overseas investor. Maybe they make a small $25,000 quick income, like $25,000 spread, and this buyer is the one who closes the escrow. They need to get the assignment AOAA completed. The only change you're going to see on this is the buyer will receive consideration or will not receive any monetary consideration. So they have to be truthful if they're going to assign this to and so for in this situation, the investor flipper should check box A, and I'm going to get $25,000 for assigning this to buyer B, who is some random stranger that the seller has no idea. Maybe that stranger never even walked the property. If the buyer is not putting it in their family trust, they're not receiving any monetary consideration, they put it in their entity or LLC, so then they can check box B. That's it. That's the only other change. Okay? But just letting you know what's common and the that's pretty much it for, I mean, I just see a lot of investors writing offers on every single property that's on the market right now. And that it's lowball offers. Okay. That's it. That's every single change and revision to all the new forms. And there's not much in terms of major changes this year. So I'm not surprised or scared. This is very easy for you to even just look at and get completed without the training. But if you have any questions or no advice on your specific transactions, I'd rather be ahead of it. Let me know, call me, text me, let me know, or send me the document. I will be very happy to guide you through any specific issues you're having in your transactions. That's what I'm here for. FYI, I'll be out of town next week for 5 days, Monday to Friday, but I'll be back on Friday. Um, Anybody else have any questions? Okay, I'll stop the recording now. I'm gonna wish you guys a great week. Drive safe while we're having our rainstorm, or what's it called? The atmospheric river event going on. Should be drive after Thursday, and just drive safe. Don't do only essential driving nowadays. Thank you all. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you guys.